Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. It is 9:33 a.m. and we do apologize. We were talking with Mohammed Desai, Executive Director of Africa for Palestine, but we lost him towards the end of the interview. But standing by is Pila-sande Mkuzo. She is junior attorney at the Equal Education Law Center to talk to us about something really very, very disconcerting. It's the issue around 80% of South African schools which are dysfunctional. Pila, very good morning to you. Welcome to the program. Pila-sande.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, Julie.
Lovely to talk with you. I think we've talked in the past, so lovely to be talking with you once again. We're hearing that there's a report that's been released suggesting that the majority of South African schools are underperforming. And when we say majority of South African schools, it's pegged at the number of 80%. So talk to us about that 80% and then the balance of 20%. Who are they? Are they perhaps the private schools?
So the report in itself looks at underperformance as you mentioned, and what we strive to do in the report is to interrogate how underperformance is defined, how it is determined, and how then schools are supported once you've been identified as an underperforming school. In relation to the 80% we refer to in the report is a contextualization of the issue, right? The number is by no means by the research of the EELC, but was taken from a report that was done by IJR in 2006. But we stand by that 80% because not much has changed since then, right? At the moment, we don't know what the exact number looks like. Even if the department was to give us numbers now, we are very sure that that wouldn't be an accurate number of underperforming schools because the criteria that they use, the criteria that we have an issue with, is quite narrow and excludes schools that are in dire need for support.
So, who are these schools or students that were most affected? And you're talking about a report that was conducted many years ago. And as you speak, the thought that went through my mind was post-COVID, the issue around the economy, just where we're at regarding Eskom, and all of the issues we're experiencing here in South Africa, sitting on the brink of dysfunctionality as a nation, never mind just our schools, would then suggest that the situation is much worse than we actually think it is. So who are these schools and what are the, what are the impacts? Is it teachers? Is it corruption? Is it, children that just are not willing to go to school? What were the identifying factors here?
So to answer your question of the 20%, the reality is we've got two subsystems in the education system, right? The system which provides to your more affluent areas, your well-resourced schools, you'd consider your private schools that are referred to as Model C schools, and perhaps even your Dinaledi schools, right? In this particular instance, what we found is that the reality of most dysfunctional underperforming schools are in rural areas, township areas, and schools that are serving the poor to middle class and predominantly Black and colored learners. In terms of the issues that we found, there were a host of challenges which were cross-cutting in all provinces, believe it or not. Things such as curriculum delivery, learner transport, the quality of teachers and teacher retention, things such as learning material, and the shortage of proper learning materials, and I think lastly, the proper management of the school and the safety around the school. And currently, the criteria in terms of the law only looks at three things, which is the academic performance of the school, whether there's a breakdown in management and governance of the school, and threats of safety. So it excludes a whole host of things which contribute to a school dysfunctioning and eventually becoming an underperforming school.
What are those other issues that you believe needs to be in place for the schools to be fully functional? You highlighted that the Department of Education are only focused on three items here. What are the
Mm,
other issues that we should be looking at? And
mm,
having said that as well, uh, we've been talking about the situation for a very long time, the general South African public. We decry the situation of our schools in rural areas and in townships. So, what needs to happen? I think civil society needs to take a bigger role in ensuring that our children are better and equally educated, that our schools are on par. Why is this not happening? Why don't we mobilize parents in townships and rural areas to take this matter more seriously? It's really about our future leaders, is it not? Our future
absolutely.
children, our future generations.
To answer you quite honestly, Julia, it's it's quite hard to assert a right when you don't know about that particular right, and that's where advocacy becomes important. This is where reports like these become important to agitate and get people talking about these things and realizing that no, man, there's a problem. But most importantly, giving the information out to the people who require the information to then assert their rights. In this particular instance, I'm talking specifically now to school governing bodies and parents. They play a very critical role in the ecosystem of the schooling community. And in terms of holding the school accountable. Now, when they know that they're actually entitled to being supported, they're entitled to remedial intervention, it starts being easier for them to start asserting that particular right. And we call, in terms of now giving them this information, it's also about empowering them and capacitating them in asserting that particular right and knowing what the law says in terms of how to go about getting what they need. In terms of civil society, absolutely. I mean, as I said, the education community or schooling community is a very delicate ecosystem and has different role players and stakeholders, and each of those stakeholders have a role to play in ensuring that education is accessible and that quality education is delivered.
Okay, we have a comment by a listener. Thank you indeed for magnifying that on the screen for me. The ANC government, all right, our listener is Afzal Noor Mohammed. Thank you indeed for becoming part of the conversation. He goes on to say that the ANC government is directly responsible for the chaos in education, state capture, and corruption by unintelligent ANC cabinet ministers and parliamentarians, as well as cadre deployment of people who have no clue, has filtered down to every government institution in the country. I agree with him 101%. He goes on to say it is only the dedication by hardworking and committed teachers, many of whom are abused by the system, that have kept things together. However, many of the old vanguard are now leaving the system and the situation. And I add on there to say, to the detriment of our youth. How do you respond to that amazing comment by Afzal Noor Mohammed?
I would say that political will becomes important in this particular scenario, because when we looked at the reports, when we looked at the provincial education reports in compiling the report, it was clear that schools are bringing up these issues. Right? It's not that they're quiet about it, and this is something new to the department. It's not. It's in their reports from 2015 to 2019, so they are aware. Why I'm saying it's political, it's about them having identified and acknowledging that there are bigger issues than the three that we've been looking at. What are we going to do about it, right? What are we going to do to fix the legislation? What are we going to do to address the issue systematically? So political power, political will does become a vital thing in this particular conversation.
Okay, Afzal Noor Mohammed has further posted another comment, and he says, until we rid our nation of the ANC government, the problem will only get worse. And if not, it's just going to continue in this vicious cycle. Okay, that we're all calling for that, are we not? We're going to have to wait for the elections in 2024 to see what happens. But having said that, There's concerns around the Department of Education as well. The resources are there, but it seems as if they don't get to the schools timeously, um, and they just allow things to fester and become worse. We also have lots of dropouts in schools. We also have lots of child pregnancies, which then, once the girls leave school to have their babies, don't necessarily go back into the system, further disadvantaging themselves and their entire futures. How are we addressing those issues? And are the monies and the resources meant for the rural and township schools getting to them? Who is monitoring that the monies get to them, that the resources get to them, that they can have a stable education system in place?
The resources are there. You would remember that recently there was quite an uprise or an uproar from society when in the Eastern Cape money was taken back to Treasurer, knowing the context and the situation of schools in the Eastern Cape when it comes to infrastructure. The reality is resources are there, the systems are there, but it becomes implementation. I think that's where the major blockage is. And that's one of the things we've also identified in the report, where we noted that there are accountability mechanisms, but the implementation thereof is where the problem begins. So it's having people doing things timelessly, and not, trying to cut bureaucracy, and not unnecessarily halting the process, as it were.
Okay, the other big issue I have is from time to time, you find a lot of vandalism that happens at schools.
Mm,
Infrastructure is totally damaged.
mm,
You also find during the COVID period as well, it was very, very prevalent that by the time the children went back to the schoolyard, there was only a shell that has been left of that school building. What needs to happen to conscientize our communities that they are robbing our children of their futures by vandalizing and stealing from schools? uh, it's our own communities that are doing that, and they're robbing our children of a very, very needed and valuable future by
mm,
destroying their schools. How do we go about conscientizing our children that and our youngsters and our unemployed youth that there are certain key points, and that's a national key point. As far as I'm concerned, schools should be national key points, that you don't touch it because that's the future of our country.
I'd say three things: open conversations, accountability amongst ourselves, and advocacy. Open conversations to say that we're going about it the wrong way. This is not how you get employment. Yes, there's frustrations and we are fuming with frustration, but there are other ways of expressing that frustration.
This is not how you
This is,
protest.
this is
You
not how.
don't destroy. You don't destroy infrastructure. You are further marginalizing and impoverishing yourself.
Precisely, because now you are damaging the one school that you have in your community when the next one is about 50 kilometers away. What are you doing? Do you understand? So you're not only killing yourselves, but you're killing the community as well. So having those open conversations and calling each other out. Accountability filters through that open conversation where you say, when as a community you step this far, what must be done? Do you understand? I think that the trend of letting people go needs to be curbed. We can't always excuse and say, no, it's frustration, it's frustration. We are all frustrated, but there are different ways of expressing that frustration. And I suppose advocacy and having conversations like these where we talk about the consequences of people's actions, that burning a school, vandalizing a school doesn't solve the problem, but it takes us 10 steps back. And what do you have? An underperforming school who then can't get support. And before you know it, the beneficiaries of that are the people in your community.
Pila-sande, let's understand where is this very important piece of information going to be escalated to so that we can get action, we can get our schools functional yet again. It's fine for you and I to sit here and talk about the dire strait our schools are in, but it needs to reach the ears that matter. What are you guys doing to get it to the ears that matter?
So we've since released the report. We definitely have the intention and plans of engaging the department on it and having a sit down and seeing ways in which we can collaborate if possible, or actually fleshing out the conversation on the recommendations that we make in the report. Hopefully that they do identify and see the low-hanging fruit within the report, and that they can start implementing and pushing the conversation forward. And I think having society or having the community have these conversations as well helps with that, because now it's kind of putting pressure on the department to say something, to answer, relook, reflect, and reassess how they are doing things and how they want to do things going forward.
Okay, let me wrap up with a final comment by Afzal Noor Mohammed. If my producer could just enlarge it for me on screen, otherwise I'm unable to read it. Because we do have Catherine Constantinides standing by to talk to us about International Nelson Mandela Day. Okay, Afzal Noor Mohammed, your final comment on the show this morning goes on to read, by law, the nation, or is it ratio? I think it's ratio. By law, the ratio in primary schools is a minimum of 40 learners to one teacher. Resources are limited. White Paper 6 has been a disaster, whereby schools no longer have counselors and specialist educators allocated to each school. Only those schools that charge exorbitant school fees or private schools can afford these specialists. It has been years since a gazette has come out advertising vacant posts for level 1 teachers. There is money, but unfortunately, billions and trillions of, I can't read the last part, but I guess what you are saying, Afzal Noor Mohammed, is probably corruption. The money is going into the wrong pockets, or in the pockets of corrupt officials. Let's leave it there. Pila-sande Mkuzo, thank you indeed for your thoughts and for this report. We hope and pray we're going to see some improvement in our schools. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Have yourself a good day as well.
9:51 exactly, and we are going to be talking with Catherine Constantinides, that's it, humanitarian and human rights defender, to talk about International Nelson Mandela Day.